Hey, how you doing? Daniel Ruiz Tizon is available for Monday the 27th of July 2020 with me, Daniel Ruiz Tizon, episode 254. Hope you're all well, keeping on doing what you need to be doing to keep yourself going. Early record this week, could be a long show too. I think it's going to be. It's been a difficult few days, more of which shortly. And in addition to that, some freelance stuff has come in with really tight deadlines that completely messed the week up for me. So I'm having to move things around to deal with that. Frustrating, and I'll always struggle a bit with having to undertake something for anyone, but at least I'm staying out of the man's clutches right now. The first deadline is tomorrow, Tuesday, so that's a super tight one. A second one, I think, for the start of next week, but it's something that I want to nail by Friday. I don't want to have to be on the laptop again next weekend as I've had to be this weekend. There's a few other pieces that have come in, mostly with tight deadlines again, though it's the two this week that are the tightest, the most pressing right now. My aim is to get all of them done in the next week so that I can clear the schedules for my own stuff. This often means that when the next batch of audio stuff comes in for me to turn around, I have to refamiliarize myself all over again with what that particular assignment entails editing-wise, what bit of software I need to use for it. If I was to do them piecemeal, I suppose as they came in, that wouldn't happen. But it's, I suppose it's the routine of doing something always helps me. But I don't want my own stuff being interrupted by external tasks. So at the moment, I'd rather devote a couple of full days to nailing these assignments, and then I get full days for my own stuff. But I'm certainly dreading this week. It almost feels like going back into a 9 to 5 thing. So what I've done, I've had to prep this episode on the Sunday. I'm recording on a Sunday evening for the first time in a long time. When I was with the man, that was often how I worked, which in itself gave me a real dread of both Sundays and Mondays. And I felt very lazy this weekend. Everything caught up with me and I was able to rest a lot, which I think was a good thing. But it was only because I was finally able to rest that it hit me just how physically tired I've been the last couple of years. Often I'm thinking about how mentally fatigued I am without really paying too much attention to how physically tired I might actually be. I just keep going on and on and on. And I think much of this show is going to be devoted to that today and the circumstances behind that unexpected rest. Patrons will probably have an idea of what has happened since episode 253 last Thursday. It was a tumultuous end to the week last week. It was in development as I recorded episode 253, and it escalated right after that. And I'll catch everyone up on that during this show. Sunday, well, today, let's be honest with you, I'm recording on a Sunday. I was struggling to get out of bed this morning after going back to bed after breakfast. I was reading Patrick McGrath's The Wardrobe Mistress, which I've almost finished. It's set in London, early 47, I think. And been enjoying it. Not a great book, but it's a good one. I'll give you the blurb. This is from Goodreads. January 1947, so yeah, I'm right on that, 1947. London is in ruins, there's nothing to eat, and it's the coldest winter in living memory. To make matters worse, Charlie Grice, one of the stage actors of the day, has suddenly died. His widow Joan, the wardrobe mistress, is beside herself with grief. Then one night she discovers Gricey's secret. Plunged into a dark new world, she realises that the war isn't over after all. Personally, not too keen on the nicknaming business. This whole Gricey thing is a bit troubling. It's an easy read, which I don't think is something that should belittle a book. It's an easy read, meaning it's a pleasure to read. It's a good book. It's nothing special, but it's a good book nevertheless, and any good book is a pleasure to read. And I recognise many of the Pimlico and Victoria pubs that appear in this book. It is still incredible just to think that 80 years ago there were German planes flying over this city and dropping bombs on this city and indeed other cities in the UK. This morning I was reading about 20 to 25 pages. I felt the tiredness coming in waves. I put on a podcast. I've been listening to some heavy going theology shows in the last few days, very academic stuff, which works if it's well presented. In one or two instances it's not, and I'm thinking I have to be in the mood to listen to this. I've got one on Christian theology, leans too heavily towards the evangelical, so I'm not sure that's what I was looking for. I've got one on Jewish history, which is much better. The theology side of things, that's been a big thing for me sporadically since the early noughties. And I've always enjoyed history anyway. It's something I enjoy. I do listen to quite a few history shows, and it's a good way for me to switch off. So the two go together quite well. Finished one episode on the rise of Zionism and its founder, the initial proposal of creating the State of Israel in Uganda, eventually, of course, dismissed. And I knew about all of that anyway. The host mentions Roman lions as one reason why it was perceived not to be a good idea. I can imagine the lions thing would have been a hard sell. Just a fascinating listen, though. Some stuff, as I say, some stuff I know, some stuff I don't. It's always good to learn. Just the tiredness meant the learning this weekend was always going to be limited. So getting out of bed, that was an unusual So getting out of bed has been an effort. I was able to finally give into my body this weekend, give the automaton a couple of days off. I normally work out on a Sunday, Saturday, of course, being sloth. Saturday is the one rest day of the week as far as any exercise goes. I brought the workout forward this week because I thought if I don't get up, I'm going to fall behind, and this coming week it's a long one, it's going to be a tough one, and I can't start it off by falling behind right at the start. Post-workout, had a shower, change of vest, trimmed and shaped the beard just before the shower, conditioned the beard once I was in the shower, gave it a light post-condition brush. I feel, in the words of the great Frank Costanza, or at least I did right after the shower, in the words of the great Frank Costanza after he worked out with a dumbbell, I feel vigorous. Vigor aside, this mouse on my laptop is already annoying me. It's a combination of things, actually, with the machine at the moment. Audacity, the editing software, which I really do need to move on from after 10, 11 years of using it. It's been erratic ever since I updated it. And also, every time I do a Windows update lately on Windows 10, the mouse becomes a problem. And already last month, I had to do a system reset when this last happened. It's not something I'd want to do again. And just a couple of weeks ago, maybe less, I was thinking, well, I got past that mouse problem in that time. I bought another mouse, replacement mouse, which I had to send back because it came back, it looked used when it was supposed to be new. So I sent that back, got my money back. And now the mouse was playing up again, the mouse that I had. I've got a couple of these. They both play up on this laptop right now. Now, people might think, why are you using a mouse? I can't not use a mouse. And whenever I see people on a machine not using a mouse, Apple users being the main culprits here, they remind me of when you occasionally get guitarists who play the guitar in a very unusual fashion, i.e. they've sat down, the guitar lies flat on their laps, and they're playing it like that. It just looks weird. That's how laptop users who dispense with a mouse look to me, like they've had some kind of accident and their limbs look really awkward. Also, not helping the situation with the mouse, I'm sure, got a Kodak battery in there. The last Duracell went out, I think, at the end of last week, although that Duracell wasn't that impressive, I have to say. But these Kodak batteries, they just don't last long. And you think about what Kodak was, and now you think about how a once great company is reduced to turning out batteries for Poundland for the likes of me to buy. It's like the Roman Empire circa 500 AD, but while the Roman Empire's restructuring took them east and was successful enough to keep them going, albeit in a much diminished form for another 800 or 900 years, Kodak, I mean, if they last another decade, they'll have done well. And I don't know if they're doing more than batteries right now, but surely if you're only doing batteries, surely you can improve on the quality of the batteries. I'm prepared to pay more for a good quality battery I mean, I'm not prepared to pay £4 for a Duracell, but I'd pay £2 for a Kodak if they lasted longer. Running wise, not able to run on Friday, which was disappointing. The cut on the ankle from the keys I'd stuffed down my Sports Direct Slazenger sock in a thin little kitchen towel, paper towel, had got infected. Slightest contact with my footwear, and it was almost forcing me into pulling a rare for me facial. Has impacted on the Star Wars football the last few days too. I plastered the ankle up last week's runs, just 2 last week, and I had to plaster the ankle up also for the weekend Star Wars League Cup semi-final first legs. It was cutting up the ankle again, running last week with the keys down the sock, that eventually pushed me into prioritising making a renewed search for an armband, a phone holder. I couldn't see suitable ones in high street shops. The one in the running shop that I bought from before was, as I think mentioned in episode 253, waterproof only in light rain. That didn't really work for me as a concept. So by the time I've recorded this episode, I'll hope to have kicked off my week with the first of this week's runs. It's going to hurt. I'll be cursing, but I'm going to need those post-run endorphins this week because I've got a challenging few days ahead. And, really, that's why I stick at it. I'm never going to love it, certainly not while I'm having to run through such a hilly park. It's not a park for beginners like me, but it's where I had to start. It's where I've made my progress. It's not the first time I've run in this park in the last 13 months. I used to run in the same park in the early noughties. And I used to run one summer, actually, when I was living in that haunted house of Clapham Common North Side. I used to run on the Common, which was much flatter and dirtier too. I used to run in Bahrain every day when I was out there in the run-up to the Gulf War, the Second Gulf War, always trying to follow the latest advice from the Foreign Office or the consulate, I forget which it was, to vary the times that you leave, left your flat out there, your apartment out there, given that things were very tense in terms of the attitude towards Westerners out there in the early part of 2003. Worst of all, hardest of all, I would run on the beach in Barcelona, early morning runs, which was ridiculous because there was no way I was strong or fit enough for that. As hard as the uphill segments of the park are for me on the runs, I mean, running on the beach, running on sand was just something else. So when I'm going up those hills, I do well to remember the difficulty of running on sand like I was starring in Rocky 3. The armband, let me just go back to the armband. It claimed to come with a key slot. I couldn't see the key slots when the package arrived. It arrived very quickly within a couple of days. I checked the blurb on my order. Sure enough, it said comes with a slot for your keys. I found the slot. I'm not sure that was a slot, and if it was, for what kind of keys, because even the Sylvanian family would struggle to squeeze their keys into that slot. I felt like making a video to send the seller to demonstrate the difficulty of getting the keys into the slot and asking them if they thought the effort of putting the keys into that slot is the ideal preparation for a run. I can now see myself developing a new quirk when I'm running, i.e. constantly touching the armband, tapping it to make sure that my keys are still in there. And looking at the armband, I'm not sure that it's going to be an armband that stays on the arm. Someone sent me a link on Twitter to some belt that I've never seen it before. I think it's about £35, so very pricey. If money wasn't an issue, and if you could wear that belt in a way where it wasn't a belt, it's something that I'd certainly consider. But look, I haven't even gone out for a run yet with the armband. I'll do a run or two and see if my worst suspicions are confirmed, or maybe, I'll surprise myself and I've got myself a bargain. When I saw the armband, I was underwhelmed. It doesn't even feel waterproof. I'd considered contacting the Amazon seller, which is always my default response every time I get something on Amazon. That's how disappointed I was with the armband, and the amount of times I find myself getting into it with a seller on Amazon. They talk their products up when more often than not, at my level, if you're searching for products online and you sort out the viewing low to high, your viewing preferences, then the chances are that what you're buying is going to be. And I think one of these days I'm going to get a seller just simply replying, "What do you expect for £6?" At which point I might consider replying, "Well, actually, for just $7 a month, which is less than the price of 2 UK coffees and less than a bunch of face masks in Lidl would set you back right now, etc." You're listening to Daniel Ruiz Tizon is available, episode 254, Sweating the Small Stuff, currently twice a week if you're a Patron supporter, Mondays and Thursdays, ways to get in touch, Twitter and Instagram, 1607 West Egg, facebook.com/DRT is available. That page still isn't functioning properly, etc., etc. And you can contact the show directly, DRT available at West Egg, 1607.co.uk. So let me bring you up to speed with the situation with my elderly neighbour. It was probably clear to patrons who've listened to episode 253 from last Thursday, or perhaps listened to it over the weekend, that I was suspecting something might have gone very wrong. And it was after I'd recorded and edited episode 253 and put it out there last Thursday afternoon. I do the Sainsbury's shop on Thursday afternoons. The Lidl shop is on Fridays. So I was making my way, or preparing to go to Sainsbury's on Thursday afternoon, running a bit late. And I was concerned for a number of reasons. In the last couple of weeks, the SMS communication and various handwritten notes left at my door to post stuff, it had become very erratic or non-existent. I'd drop off her papers and celeb mags or Radio Times, and the Radio Times is actually key to the events that unfolded. And I text her, and sometimes I'd toss in some weather-related small talk into the text, so it didn't look like I was just going through the formalities. And I'd finish off those texts by saying, "Look, your papers," or "It's Not Okay" magazine is outside. Obviously, I dropped the "It's Not Okay," the "It's Not" preface from the "It's Not Okay," whatever. I'm losing my thread here. Anyway, I'd let her know when these publications were outside. And in the last couple of weeks, she'd largely stopped replying. And I know she's not keen on phones, and I thought that's fine. I don't need the thanks. I can just do what some might think is virtue signaling and talk about the errands I have to do for her on the show to 40 or 50 listeners. As long as when I look out into the communal hallway and I can see that she's taken her paper or her magazines in, I know she's okay. That's enough. And I always did this thing because I've been worried about her for a long time. Since I moved in a while back, she's been largely housebound, and we built up whatever it is we've had, mainly through the ex, who, to be fair, did loads for her, and they were close. But I'd come in from the cafe in the afternoons, and once a week I'd find the neighbour struggling up the stairs with loads of bags of shopping, wheezing, and I'd take the bags up for her. No big deal. There were times when, in fact, I think there were a few instances where I'd see her, because she would do her shopping all the way in Sutton. I'd see her waiting for a bus, a connecting bus to take her back to the flat. I wouldn't have a pass, but I'd say to her, "Look, give me the bulk of your bags. You can get on the bus with one, and I'll take the rest of these bags up to you when I get in. But I'm going to walk, and I'll be there in about 10 minutes. And there were a couple of instances where I'd walk up, she'd be on the bus would come, so she had a real head start on me, and I'd get to the flat 10 minutes later and she was still going up the stairs wheezing with the bag. So it was clear that she was struggling to live on the top floor next door to me. And, there are no lifts here, and, right from the moment I moved in, the moment that I first met her, I could see that she's not really suited to living on a top floor in a building with no lifts, not in her state. It's sad, but it's the truth. She's a homeowner. She's lived around here. Well, she's lived in this building for 40 years. I think she's lived around here longer. I can understand not wanting to relocate. or the fear more so now, there's a throat going, more so now of going into care. I completely get that. But the thing is, she wouldn't allow any professional help. She's on her own. Relatives come to her at Christmas, they drive her to the sticks, and by Boxing Day, they've returned her to her flat on her own. So she's been reliant on me and on a couple of other neighbours who, like her, have been here for decades. And the thing is, we're not professionals. I can do the neighbourly thing, but I'm not a professional. And I've also selfishly got my own life to lead that I'm not doing very well on leading because I've got lots of things like this that just get in the way. And the thing is, though, I talk about the importance of community, and what I've been doing for this neighbour for a few years is that it's community in action. And I hope that if I live to her age, and I'm not sure I want to if I'm finding myself in that same situation, but if I do, I hope there is some guy out there, perhaps being born around now, who's going to have some shows, some podcasts, barely listen to. He might be semi-bitter about that. And he's going to be living next door to me, and he's going to be running errands for me at the weekends and twice a week as well on the weekdays. So it's community in action, but I'm not going to sit here claiming that it was an arrangement that I was behind. It was something that the ex had got off the ground. It was something that I would help out. It was something that was less of a problem when there was two of us doing it. But when the ex left, and as soon as I was off crutches after my surgery, all of it, all 4 days a week of it, it all passed on to me. And, I'm not a social media maven stroke influencer here. I've never boasted on this show about how great my life is, because it's not. The few of you that listen to this know it's not. And also hopefully know that this show is not about saying poor me either. It's simply about being as honest with you as I can be. This is a show, what has become a show about life, I think. And for a long time, unfortunately for me, unfortunately for you, because you've got to hear about it, you've got to hear me moan about it every week, it's been a struggle. So to then have to take on the extra responsibility of all of these errands that take up time and a lot of energy, and a lot of morale, I think, as well. A lot of that blue sky thinking, say, that I might get from a run, for instance, are just drained by these errands. And, I'm not where I should be. The errands, I think, have been difficult. They've been unfair. And they've added to whatever this period of my life is. I've had enough on my plate with my aunt and uncle. And, to have this too, to have someone that is having to rely on a virtual stranger to do what their family should be doing, it's something that merely adds to the belief that I need to be out of this flat and away from all the uncomfortable associations that this flat has for me, and there's been a few, all of it, even a couple of years ago, maybe longer, I dedicated an episode to a little boy who was only 2, I think. His family lived downstairs. They'd just moved out to their dream home somewhere in the sticks, and he died in his sleep. It wasn't a cot death, but it was in that vein. And I always remembered him playing out in the garden with one of the downstairs neighbours who would look after him while his parents were at work, and I could remember his voice and things like that. I think there's a lot of sadness in this building, certainly for me. And look, I've been lucky with this neighbour because, they've been next door, and we're probably the 2 quietest people in London, living next door to each other. So we've been quite lucky both in that respect. Separated by 40 odd years, but with lives eerily similar, except in this relationship, this weird relationship, I've provided all the legs, all the energy, and knowing that my life is almost as dull as hers as I make my way across the road to buy her papers or, the Radio Times or It's Not Okay magazine during the week, that really just hasn't helped me mentally. Getting back to what happened anyway, Tuesdays, religiously, I always get the Radio Times text message from her. She'll give me the date of the latest copy. I sit on the text for a while, jaw clenched, but once I know when I'm likely to get out that day, or if at all, I'll text her back. Sometimes, occasionally, I can get the magazine for her on the same day, but more often than not, it's a Thursday, and I'll text her at some point on the Tuesday, saying, no problem, it'll be Thursday at the latest, and I'll text you when it's outside your door, just to let her know that I've got it in hand. Last Tuesday, 21st of July, no text. The previous week, the Radio Times text came unusually for her very early in the morning. The previous week, thinking about it now, it actually came in the early evening. So both times were erratic for her because she's as regular as clockwork with the Radio Times text, which tend to come around lunchtime on a Tuesday. Wednesday comes along, last Wednesday, 22nd of July. And part of me is relieved, selfishly, one less errand, I'm thinking. And then part of me is wondering whether she's taken this errand off my hands and passed it on to one of the long-time neighbours on the ground floor, maybe, one of the recent copies of the Radio Times was brought to her, delivered to her door in slightly bedraggled fashion as I stuffed the recently, whatever it is I bought from Sainsbury's on the Thursday, where I've got the Radio Times for her, and, maybe she feels that the delivery leaves a lot to be desired. I was thinking maybe she's just passed on the Radio Times errand to one of the long-time neighbours on the ground floor, or maybe she's heard the podcast and it's clear that I've been unhappy about the errands, so she's looking to share things out. Or it could be option 3. Maybe something's happened. And option 3 has occurred a couple of times in my life, with my dad notably when he went missing. I acted way too late to report him missing, even though what happened to him had happened on the day he disappeared. I wasn't to know that. I was way too slow in reporting him. In my defence, that was my previous experience of happy pills, and unlike the current batch, I was actually happy on those 2002 ones, albeit artificially. Maybe if I was happy on this current batch, maybe I wouldn't have acted eventually as decisively as I did with the neighbour. So from a neighbourly point of view, by Wednesday, I was thinking, I had lots of conflicting emotions. The overriding one in recent months, the last couple of years really, has been, I'm not happy that I'm stuck here. This place isn't doing me any good mentally. I'm dealing with so much, and on top of that, I'm now this woman's de facto carer. But the neighbourly thing to do, I thought, is to prompt her for the Radio Times last week. I'd had no text. Maybe it would be a nice touch from me to prompt her on the Radio Times. She might like that. She might appreciate it. I didn't want to get to the weekend and then have her ask me where it was, and I cutely say, well, you never texted, knowing by now that she always wants the Radio Times. Now, I knew from the previous week, and I mentioned this either on last Monday's show or Thursday's Patron show, I knew that she told me she was struggling with her hand, that it had swollen. And I'd seen that the last text she sent me was full of spelling errors, which was unusual for her, and no doubt due to the swelling. So what I did, I grabbed a pink post-it note, and patrons heard this bit on Thursday's show, so the 16, bear with me while I bring the reluctant to sign up listeners up to speed. I took that post-it note and I simply scrawled RT on the post-it note, RT obviously for Radio Times. I texted her, I said, if you can't text, all you have to do, and I'd slipped this post-it note right under her door all the way through. All you have to do is push this post-it note right back out. And I knew that that in itself wouldn't be easy for her because she finds it very difficult to bend down to the floor, but she has to do it to get her paper or, get her mail. I have considered putting a little table out there for her, but again, I thought that she might find that a bit disrespectful, that I was thinking that she was having problems bending down and reaching stuff. And again, I'm trying to be respectful of this person. They don't want help, and even though they are a burden, I'm sure that when you get to that age that you know that you're a burden on someone, and that's not going to feel great. So I didn't want to be the one to suggest putting a table there upon which her mail would be placed and her magazines and papers. So I thought that my idea was I push this note under the door, this post-it note, then all she has to do is push that note right back out, and I'll know that she wanted the Radio Times, and I'd get it for her. And actually, just going back to the Sunday, I had offered, when she told me about the swelling, I had offered to get her a doctor, or to get in touch with her doctor if she told me who they were. I heard nothing back. So again, same as the table, I was mindful of overreaching, because even though she trusts me to a certain extent, she's got her pride. She's a very proud woman, and there are other neighbours, principally on the ground floor, who know her better than I do, and she'd probably deal with such a suggestion better from them rather than from me. Meantime, someone had left mail for her, but way away from her door, which is pointless because she never goes out except to throw her rubbish. So I got the letters, I slipped them halfway under her door. This was around the same time as I did the post-it note. But with her mail, there's a difference. I never push her letters completely under the door. I knew by doing this, and it's something that I've always done with her. By having half of her mail stick out from under her door, it allows me to gauge whether anything might be wrong with her. Around 30 hours later, Thursday afternoon, Patron episode finished and uploaded, and I'm getting ready for Sainsbury's. I'm running a little late. I look out again into the communal hallway for about the 10th time that day, and the letters are still there, and the post-it note hasn't been pushed out. Now, importantly, the communal hallway cleaners come on a Thursday, so of course they might have seen a post-it note in the hallway. What's RT? They're not going to know, and picked it up and just put it with the rubbish when they cleaned the hallway. But she wouldn't have pushed out the note and left the letters uncollected, and at that point it was clear to me that something was indeed very wrong. She hadn't seen the note or the mail. I prepped an email for the two downstairs neighbours who both lived here, I think, since the mid to late 80s. Two women, separate households on the ground floor. Nice people. I left the email in draft. I checked the neighbour's door again. No change. And I was thinking, what do I do here? I was feeling paranoid about sending the email. And then, sending the email, going out to the shop, and suddenly I look across to the neighbour's door and the letters have been collected, the post-it note's been pushed out, and I end up looking like I was being over-dramatic. But by now I was satisfied something serious had happened. I sent out the email, I headed to the shops. The emails had gone to a Hotmail account and an AOL. So in addition to having a bubble with 280-somethings and running errands for an elderly neighbour, I'm now emailing people with email addresses that shouldn't have survived past 2002. This is where I am with things. On the way back from Sainsbury's, I called the kid, possibly to distract myself from the fact I was 3 nectar points down this week, owing to the fact that I hadn't bought the neighbour's Radio Times. So I called the kid. He's still working from home, I think, until September. He's still living at home, the home he now co-owns with his younger brother. I think he's got his savings back up to 17,000, he said. Remember, I think he had 17,000 when he appeared on the show via Skype about 6 or 7 months ago. Then he'd loaned someone 3,000, so it was down to 14,000, but he's now back up to 17k. He put me on hold while he switched on his Bluetooth, told me that he'd just bought these new £60 Anchor earphones on Amazon, which were brilliant. Via the Amazon link on my page, I wondered, wait a minute, he began. I can do that? For the last 5 years, I replied. I didn't know I could do that, Daniel. These earphones are wicked, by the way. The kid always says I never call him. To be fair, he has a point. I'm like that with most friends, to be honest, unless, like me, they're on their own, particularly during the lockdown, because, people know that you're on your own and you don't want to be calling and coming across as needy. People have their own lives to lead. You've got to tough it out, and I've been tough enough to tough this out. But as the kid had remarked on this, he actually remarked on this the last time we spoke, that I never called him. And I thought, yeah, he's right, and that's something that I'm going to correct. And that was the idea behind the call. I put it off for a couple of days. I told him this and said that from now on he wouldn't be able to hold that over me, and also that in case I forgot, this call I had made should also suffice for his upcoming birthday, which is in the middle of August. Yeah, 13th of August, he chipped in. I know when it is. I said, I'm just saying in case I forget, just like you forget my birthday every year. This call can count towards your birthday, because on the couple of occasions I have forgotten, I do get an email in which his displeasure is clear. I got back to the flat having spoken to the kid. I had a rucksack on me as well as 2 shopping bags. I'd finally used both straps on the rucksack. The thing I don't like about rucksacks is when I wear both straps, and it's rare for this reason, I feel claustrophobic. I feel like I'm being apprehended, but it is great for your posture. The bag was heavy. I was worried about my back, so I put both straps on, and I was coming up like that with a couple of shopping bags too, and I was startled by the two downstairs neighbours, the two ladies on the ground floor as I came up. They'd acted quickly, which was very good of them. They'd acted quickly in response to my email. One of the neighbours, the older lady, very elegant, well-spoken, had walked all the way up barefoot. Tried to avoid looking at the feet and wondered whether they would be washing their feet before they got into bed that night. I just didn't know what the idea was behind coming up 2 flights of stairs barefoot. And the other neighbour was trying to talk to my neighbour through the door. And neighbour barefoot had said that they'd also grown concerned about our mutual neighbour's welfare. There were multiple things going on here for me. Social distancing, okay, in a tight hallway. Given that I've isolated so well, my mask was hurting my ears. I tied 2 knots in the straps because otherwise the mask was just falling down all the time. But those knots, I think, are pressing down on my ears. I had the mask tucked under my chin, but the thin straps, they just keep cutting into the ears, especially the left ear for some reason. Also, I didn't want to put my bags down in the communal hallways. That was the second situation I had going on there. And as I stood there talking to the 2 neighbours, keeping a social distance, although they weren't keeping a social distance from each other, so I'm wondering whether those 2 households are mixing. And as I continued to hold on to my 2 shopping bags without putting them on the floor, I must have looked like one of those contestants in strongman contests holding onto a car battery for as long as possible. I was fretting. I was thinking, how do I open this door, my door here, without seeming rude? Because the only way we can socially distance safely on the landing is by me going into the flat. And if I open the door, they're also going to note that while I open the door, I'm still not putting the bags on the floor because I never do. So I didn't really want that being noted. They had established some vocal contact with a neighbour, and they'd asked her to come to the door. "You've got your fan club here," one of them said, the one at the door. And my neighbour, I could hear her faintly, but she did seem to sound very far away, even to the neighbour that was at the door, and was speaking in what Barefoot later wrote when she emailed the neighbour's immediate relative and CC'd us in on the email. She wrote that my neighbour was communicating in a sing-song voice. It wasn't her own voice. My neighbour said she would open the door, but then nothing would happen, and this happened a couple of times. It was a huge concern and more complicated for me. I could see that because the ex is or was very close to this neighbour. Contact would need to be made with her, but I played it rather astutely. I didn't need this to become even more difficult for me, because it is a difficult situation mentally. And I arranged to give Barefoot the ex's details abroad if I could find them. I thought I had them somewhere because I'd needed them for the tenancy agreement when I sorted that out at the start of the year. And the chances are that she would have contact details for the neighbour's relatives. So it wasn't something that could be avoided, but it could be done in a certain way that would mean we didn't have contact with each other, which I think, is not going to be good for either of us. The neighbours and I had compared notes on our experiences with my neighbour in recent weeks, and I made mention that very early on in the lockdown, it was clear to me that she was starting to struggle more because she had, things like she never had the right change for the errands, which she paid for every Sunday, which I mentioned only because it was a departure from the norm. And it was noted my end because it made things even more difficult for me because most shops don't want cash transactions now, understandably, which is why it became such an even bigger deal for me on Thursdays to pay for the Radio Times and Sainsbury's, mainly because I knew I needed to break into the notes that she was giving me every Sunday. I didn't want to be owing her usual £1.40 every week from her tenner when I knew that I might not be back in the shop until the Thursday, although it's a small amount and she trusted me. I didn't want that to be another small thing that I was sweating over. After going back inside the flat without my bags being put on the hallway landing, I did briefly wonder if the two neighbours who'd come up might have discussed my new prison look, the shaven head and the big beard, and whether it suited me or not as they went back or they went back downstairs or into one or the other's flats. Meantime, a contact email was quickly obtained for the neighbour's brother, and I was CC'd on an email. There were no changes going well into the night in terms of the circumstances next door, and it was becoming clear to me that we needed to act. We needed to be decisive. One of the neighbours had obtained my neighbour's GP details from the chemist, a nearby chemist. They'd contacted her doctors. The doctor hadn't responded going into midnight, so at that point it was decided 111 would be called. And I was looking at the 111 website, and it didn't seem to be the kind of place that you call for this kind of situation. But the call went ahead. I think the fear of doing what should have been done, i.e. calling the police perhaps to put the door in, apart from the charge to fix the door afterwards, I think the concern was that we're all aware of our neighbour's fear of being forced to leave her home because she shouldn't be there. And again, also in terms of breaking the door down, it can be done, although her door looked very fortified, but there was no real run up there, so you wouldn't have got that much momentum. It would have been a difficult door to break down. But anyway, knowing her fear of being forced to leave her home, because, she will know that she probably shouldn't be there in her condition on a top floor flat alone. And I think in respecting that, I think we made a bad situation worse in terms of by trying to do the right thing. Around, just after midnight, a 111 GP came again. He couldn't get my neighbour to the door, but had heard her and was satisfied she was breathing. All the while, the letters were still positioned halfway under her door. The Radio Times post-it note hadn't been pushed out. The 111 GP said that he'd heard her, albeit faintly. He was satisfied she was breathing, and he left. And I was very uneasy about all of this. We all were. That night, I'd lined up the two teams for the first of the Star Wars League Cup semi-final first legs, Empire hosting X-Wing. The teams had been selected, the lineups had been jotted down. Every lineup, every Star Wars football game, every scorer, the minute of every goal, the second of every goal is jotted down. It's been that way since 1982. It's a pain, but it's what I do. The teams were waiting to kick off. They were in their formations, but I was uneasy because all this stuff was going on. I was getting texts out from the neighbours, which is another thing that I've had to give my number out within the building, and that's, basically every time now in this situation where you get a text, it's from a neighbour, it's going to be something needs to be done about whatever, and that's not really a way that I like to live. And I was getting all these texts about what should be done next, and I thought any minute now someone could knock on the door. I'm going to have no option but to let them in rather than keep them in the hallway, which might be rude. This could be April 89 all over again, a month before my first shave, April 89 all over again, when my sister and her friend turned up and found me in the middle of a Star Wars football game. I didn't want that situation being repeated. So I aborted the game just before it started. I left the goals out. Left them out. I wasn't going to remove them and then have to go to the trouble of aligning them all over again. I laid off the talc in too for the evening. I do like to sprinkle a bit of talc on the back of the neck since I've been shaving my head. Back of the neck gets a bit sore. I find talc's very effective at dealing with that. And laid off the talc just in case I was needed outside. The concern then was mounting. And, my own concerns, social distancing, in addition to that, increased footfall of her relatives turning up when they would turn up. That extended to concern over the paramedics who were inevitable. That much was clear. Also, inside the flat, I was sitting on ham that was 5 days past its expiry date. Now, I've risked eating ham 3 days out of date, layering it on the Sloth Saturday calzone conversion, but I'm thinking, was 5 days a risk? And I thought, 5 might be 2 days too many. But I still took a look at the ham. And as I was looking at the ham, I asked myself, why am I looking at the ham? Why torture myself about wastage? Because however many slices I've wasted, I still can't eat it. 5 days is too big a risk. In the end, it was only 2 slices of ham left. I could live with that. And, just thinking about it, just thinking about the situation, just thinking about the shows over the last few months, moaning about the errands. The police might listen to a few shows I could do with listeners, by the way. And, they'd be hearing my moaning stroke bitching about It's Not Okay magazine every week and establish from that, from the moaning, from the bitching, that the errands was something that I wasn't happy about. They might think, this is a person of interest. What do we know about this David Ruiz Tizon? And some officer might say to their superior, well, we know he wears 2 pairs of shorts when he runs. What else do we know? There might be some high-flying, young, tattooed copper fast making a name for themselves who would have learned that in the week the neighbour was discovered and taken into hospital that right away I'd stopped the errands. Their superior might hear that and start thinking, now that is interesting. I might get hauled in for questioning. Well, Mr. Ruiz Tizon, you didn't waste any time not buying It's Not Okay magazine and the Daily Right Wing for her, did you? Probably say, look, I didn't do anything. Something happens to her, I'm losing 12 nectar points a month I get from her Radio Times. This affects me. I'm innocent. It's interesting, is it not? They might go on. Is it okay if we call you David? It's interesting, David, is it not, that you stopped buying the magazines and papers right away. You didn't waste the opportunity. You didn't wait. You stopped right away. I'd weigh this up and I'd just say, look, it's like this, officer. The last 2 years, they've been horrendous, okay? It's been one thing after another. Surgery, the ex left. I got left in the flat. I've got all these memories in the flat. I got saddled with these errands. I'm heavily medicated. The last year, I've been on double the dose. My uncle's very ill. My agent's dropped me. My aunt's ill. I'm tired. I haven't had a weekend lying for 2 years. I know every minor celebrity, a member of the royal family now because of the lowbrow rubbish I've had to buy. Her family never visit. Since last summer, I've played about 500 games of Star Wars football. I had to bring my podcast back late last year just to get a bit of money coming in. You've got a show? They might ask. Yeah, I've got a show. I set up a Patron for it. How's that going? Daniel Ruiz Tizon is available, episode 254. It's not meant to be a bumper edition, but it certainly looks like it's turning into a bumper edition. Ways, as always, to support the show. An iTunes review. Please, 30 seconds of your time. Every single show that you listen to. Big shows and the small shows like this one. They all ask the same thing for a reason. But they get those reviews. iTunes, please. 30 seconds of your time. Amazon shopping. If the kid's listening, highly unlikely. The way you can support the show, another way you can support the show is by clicking on the Amazon link at my website, danielruiztizon.com. Amazon recognizes you've come through my site and kicks back a small percentage of your purchase at no extra cost back to my work. You've also got PayPal and coffee.com links at danielruiztizon.com. Those are alternative ways to support this work. You make a donation, large or small, and I'll WeTransfer that week's Patron episode to you as soon as I see that donation come through. Why do I always say that? Assuming that I'm not busy, you'll get the show right away. If not, you'll get it on the same day, though. I promise you. Most importantly, though, and this is important, the best way to support this work is via the Patreon page. It's just $7 a month. You're getting nearly 2 hours of content at the moment every week. It is a sweet deal. I've also, in the last couple of weeks, I've brought in a second tier, an introductory tier for those of you unsure about committing to supporting the show. The Toe Dipper is just $3.50 a month. For that, you get access to every other Patreon episode, and as a welcome, you also get access to the studio episode of the A to Z of me and my dad that was released to patrons earlier this year. And you'll get the first Toe Dipper Patreon episode, which will be this week's one, episode 255. That will be unlocked for you. Patreon.com/DRT available. Sign up there for a different kind of podcast. Join those 16 currently keeping this show afloat. I don't think you're going to find many better deals out there. And I promise not to sell you a mattress during the show. I mean, realistically, if you're still having to think about putting aside $7 a month to commit to this show, or even $3.50. I mean, you're not going to buy a mattress. There's no point in me going down the mattress route. Still got a way to go on this show. Looking at my notes, what is going on? Let me try and wrap things up. I'll give you the rest of the news on developments with the neighbour, the bad and the good. On Friday, this is Friday. Friday was the 24th of July around noon. The neighbour's brother came. Shortly afterwards, the paramedics arrived, and they were all there for a couple of hours. At no point was I glad I hadn't got things wrong and been over dramatic with my concerns. For once, I think it was my anal side paying off. How many people would have been slipping the mail just halfway under the door, or devising rudimentary post-it note systems to establish their neighbours' welfare? Though I do think we really should have got the police out by Thursday night. I do think we should have done that once we were all agreed that something seemed very wrong. So basically what had happened, the neighbour had spent several days in the same position after a fall. Pressure sores, the paramedics said, indicated that she'd fallen at least 72 hours earlier, and she'd been lying in the same position. One of the neighbours, barefoot, reckoned it was Monday night because the neighbour had turned away from the bins with a bag of rubbish in her hand. That's when the bins go out on Monday night. The bin guys come around on Tuesday morning. So that fitted in with everything, I think. I've told my neighbour many times that I can put her bins out. At least doesn't involve me. That particular errand doesn't involve me having to buy her some other awful celebrity magazine. So her fall, she'd fallen face down. She'd stayed in that position for about 80 hours roughly, unable to move, unable to eat or drink, all the rest of it. So you can imagine the sight that greeted her brother and the paramedics. And you can imagine the state of the flat by the time they got in there. I've been in her flat, not for a couple of years. It is a lovely flat, actually. It looks like a home. Obviously, I've not been in there the last couple of years when her decline has accelerated. But certainly when I was in there, it's not a place that you could say is in a state. She's definitely house proud. And sound of South London. On you go. Come on. The situation, he said, trying to recover from another police siren. The situation reminded me of what my dad used to say to me. Never move next door to the elderly. They're always falling a lot. I could hear his voice, clear as anything, coming through. On Sunday afternoon, the neighbour had been moved into a ward and had called one of the neighbours, not barefoot, but the other woman, who said it was likely that we could go visit now. Now, I'm not going to go into any hospital, not right now, not when I'm bubbling with 280-somethings. I don't want to be, doing anything to harm that bubble, especially when my aunt and uncle are both vulnerable. But, of course, I'm glad the neighbour's okay. I'm just thinking surely something has to change. I feel guilty, but not that guilty, but guilty enough that I enjoyed having lie-ins this weekend, because I needed them. And the lie-in was the catnap without the bad dreams and the grogginess. And I suppose that if the neighbour returns, there's nothing I can do. I'm glad that she's okay, but that stress, that concern for her welfare is going to increase even more now, because it's clear that the flat is a problem for her. I mean, there's no way that I can ever come off these pills while I'm living here, because this flat, this building, this area has so many unhappy associations for me, accumulated in a remarkably short space of time. And this situation with this neighbour, this worry, it just adds to all of that. Now, let me just switch a light on here. I'm recording in the dark, but I'm going to need a light to give you this week's Nectar Points update. Lidl's first on Friday, so we jumped to Friday first, Friday the 24th. I bought 4 chicken steaks again, breaded fish, definitely out of favour. The breaded chicken steaks from Lidl, 4 for £1.69, remind me of the Space Daddy's vampire novel that he wrote in 1998, in which the vampires don't actually appear until the final paragraph, and even then you don't actually see the vampires. A vampire novel with a difference. Actually, it was a novella rather than a novel, but still no vampires regardless. It's a bit like that, because you're looking for the chicken, you're hoping there's chicken, you're unsure given it's £1.69 for 4 breaded chicken steaks. You're unsure that for that kind of money you're going to get chicken. You're trying to smell the chicken, you're trying to stay optimistic. They have a strong smell, the steaks, but if that's chicken, it's a chicken that's new to me. I'll say that. There was a brief set to in the little Brixton store. The Pistons, one of their most notorious members, Henry, back now in his little uniform, which looks remarkably like one of my summer tops. Henry had justifiably, but not in the most diplomatic fashion, pulled a customer up. A customer, 30-something male, wearing an earpiece and talking casually on their phone, like they were at home. Pulled them up on their banana handling. This customer was breaking off single bananas, trying to put together what looked like a formidable quintet of larger bananas. And Henry pointed out that kind of handling, any kind of handling really, belonged to the pre-pandemic era, that you can't do this now. And I was certainly with Henry on this one. The customer, though, took umbrage at the manner in which Henry delivered this information, and looks again like head office might be hearing a bit more about Henry. So let me give you the nectar points, the actual nectar points. Remember, 3 nectar points down this week owing to no Radio Times cash purchase. By the way, when I told my aunt that we thought something was up with the neighbour, this was on Thursday on my way to Sainsbury's, my aunt did say, don't buy the magazines because it looks like you might not be getting reimbursed this week. And I was thankful that I took the advice. So my opening balance going into Sainsbury's last Thursday was 61 points. Bought the usual stuff, 6 pints of skimmed milk, spicy chicken, thin and crispy pizza for the calzone conversion. I bought some sweet chili sauce, 125, 2 bars of Dove cream soap, which have been great really for the lockdown, because in the early days of the lockdown, all that extra hand wash, there's the throat, all that extra hand washing, using hand wash, it's awful for the hands. And someone on Twitter recommended I go for an old school bar of soap. And it's one of the best moves I've made during the lockdown. My hands are so much better for going back to an old school bar of soap. Bought some crackers as well, Sainsbury's own crackers. 2 single oranges. Very decisive action on a loose baking potato for 26p. Spotted it as soon as I went into the store, which I think is important because it stops you, manhandling loose vegetables. Want to be respectful towards other customers, and I hope that they are as respectful to me. So my previous points balance was 61 points. I earned 10 points on last week's purchase, taking me up to 71 points. I'll say that clearly, 71 points, which are worth 35p, and that is this week's Nectar Points update. And I'll conclude the show with a last update on the neighbour, because I had an email come through during the show, and I should say mixed feelings my end. Pleased, of course, that she's okay, but I'll be even more worried, I think, as I touched on a few moments ago, if she returns to live next door. She's a good neighbour, I'll be clear on that. I still don't have a downstairs neighbour, or neighbours, as the case may be. COVID has slowed that down. Might get lucky with the new ones whenever they arrive. I'm a bit anxious about that. If next door goes, if my neighbour doesn't return, I'm thinking, am I going to really get lucky with 2 sets of new neighbours? Because me and luck aren't familiar bedfellows. Am I going to get lucky with the new people that move in downstairs below me? And am I going to get lucky if someone else moves in next door? And, since downstairs moved out, my sleeping hours have just gone all over the shop, because I don't have to worry about any idiots downstairs taking issue with my sleeping patterns, even though I do consider myself to be as considerate a neighbour as possible. I've grown up in flats all my life. I know how to live in flats, in poorly converted flats, I should add, not purpose-built flats. I never lived in a council house. Grew up in poorly converted flats. I know how to walk and how to respect my neighbours in a flat such as this. So I've just come off a weekend, really, where I had my first and second lie-ins of the last 104 weeks. And that is the truth. And I didn't even know how lie-ins work anymore. I woke up yesterday morning, Saturday morning, not having to run any errands. And I thought, how does this work? How does a lie-in work? Do I just lie here? Do I just try and relax? Very different to the catnap. I know where I am with the catnap. I've done my errands. I'm knackered. I've got up early to go across the road to the shop. I'm feeling low already anyway. I lie down, I read, I listen to something. I fall into a deep slumber that I know is going to bring a crap dream. And sure enough, I have a crap dream. I wake up sad, I wake up groggy, and I try and salvage the day from there. So I know where I am with the catnap. There are no surprises with the catnap. The lying, though, that was strange territory for me. Maybe not this week because of these rubbish deadlines that I've got coming up, which have messed things up for me. But in a normal week, a lie-in would have benefited me hugely, I think. And what I had this weekend, I had a fleeting glimpse of a comfortable life, a life far more comfortable than the one I've had in the last couple of years. The glimpse of a life I could have had if I hadn't inherited this burden, these errands. And if the neighbour does return to the building, and while I don't see how, and even my aunt said I don't see how that woman can return to live there, but at the same time nothing surprises me. But if she does return to the building, I'm mindful that she shouldn't be here. We've seen what can now happen. How do we stop this from happening again? She's been too proud to allow for the extra help that she clearly needs, meaning it's more pressure on me, more pressure on the other neighbours, but particularly more pressure on me. And the other neighbour, one of the neighbours, the one at the door, is the one who's been sorting out her money. So I think my neighbour has been giving her checks, and this neighbour goes and cashes the checks, comes back with notes. The notes come to me, and I have to break the notes. The whole thing, gets even more complicated when I find myself being CC'd on these emails to all the neighbours in the building, half of whom do nothing anyway. And that's not a criticism, That's where I should be, doing nothing, living my life. And the emails include the ex who no longer lives in the country, and this email going out including them. It's just very insensitive on the part of the sender, including both of us on that email. It's embarrassing enough for me being here with people knowing that she's gone and that I got stuck here without that kind of email going around. And again, that's something that wouldn't happen with me if I was sending out the email. I'm aware enough, I'm anal enough, I'm sensitive enough to a situation like that to not do that, to be mindful of things like this. So what I've done, I just replied directly to the neighbour, no reply all, and I just said, thanks for the update. The bottom line in all of this is, of course, I'm glad that she's okay. She's a nice woman. She needs more help. As to where that help comes from, that's not my responsibility. That's for her family to sort out. They need to step up. They maybe need to be aware of these strangers who are doing things for a member of their family. Who's this guy who's getting up early every weekend to buy this crap paper? Who is this neighbour who's cashing checks for this relative of ours? The situation, it just does nothing to ease my melancholy, and it just makes me wonder how I've ended up in this situation. If the neighbour does return, and I find myself having to return to the local shop at the weekend for her papers, the only bright note about that is that it would at least give me an opportunity to have small talk. The newsagent maybe ask me, hey, where you been, man? We thought the virus had got you. And then I can say, remember 2 years ago when I started coming in here for the first time for the paper, and I told you that the Daily Mail was for my neighbour and not for me because it was important to me that people knew that I wasn't buying this for myself, and you didn't care? Well, it was for my neighbour, and something happened to them, and she was in hospital, etc., etc. So I had some brief time off from these errands. And you know what I did? I had a lie-in. I had my first lie-ins for 2 years. That's putting a blue sky thinking spin on things. That would be an opportunity that I would welcome. The only thing that I would welcome if the errands resume. And that is it. That is the end of this week's regular show, a long show. I hope, can you enjoy a show like this? Whatever. It's done. Patron listeners, you'll get your weekly bonus edition, episode 255. That is out on Thursday. And as always, I appreciate you guys supporting this work. Might not be out until Thursday evening, owing to these deadlines that I have this week, causing me to move things around. But rest assured, 255 will be out by Thursday evening. The rest of you, if you want to join them, sign up at patreon.com/DRT available. Thank you all for listening. If you're not joining us on Thursday, I'm back next Monday with episode 256. Get those shoulders back. Keep on walking towards the sun. Keep washing those hands. I'm Daniel Ruiz Tizon, and this start of the week I have been available.